Emma always liked an adventure. Lily was usually scared, but she went along. Sophie was curious, always asking questions. They were best friends together since kindergarten. That summer the days were long and hot. Nights were for secrets and dares. The biggest dare of all was Blackwood Lane. An old mansion stood there empty for years. People said it was haunted. They whispered stories of a family who vanished. No one ever went near it, especially after dark. One evening the air was still and heavy. Emma looked at Lily, then at Sophie. "Let's go to Blackwood Manor," she said. Her voice was low, excited. Lily shivered even though it was warm. "No, Emma, don't even joke," Lily pleaded, her eyes wide. Sophie, however, leaned in closer, a spark in her eyes. "What if the stories are true?" Sophie wondered aloud, a small smile playing on her lips. The idea, once spoken, hung between them, a forbidden thrill they couldn't ignore now. The decision was made with a mix of nervous giggles and pounding hearts. They would go that very night. They would prove the stories were just stories, or maybe a tiny part of them hoped to see something real. They gathered their flashlights, their batteries new and strong. They told no one where they were going. This was their secret adventure, a test of their bravery. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, a beautiful, deceptive calm before the unknown. As dusk settled, they rode their bikes towards Blackwood Lane. The familiar streets turned strange as they neared the mansion. Trees grew taller, closer together, their branches like gnarled fingers. The air grew colder. Finally, they saw it. Blackwood Manor stood on a hill, a dark shape against the fading light. Its windows were like empty eyes watching them. A wrought iron fence, rusted and broken, surrounded the overgrown grounds. The silence was heavy, broken only by the chirping of crickets, which sounded unnaturally loud in the unnerving quiet. The old gate groaned when Emma pushed it. The sound echoed in the twilight, like a sad old man sighing. Lily grabbed Sophie's arm, her breath catching in her throat. "Maybe this isn't a good idea," Lily whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Emma just shone her flashlight towards the house. "We came this far," Emma said, trying to sound brave for all of them. "We can't turn back now, can we?" The path to the front door was cracked and uneven, weeds pushing through the stones, nature reclaiming its own. The mansion itself seemed to loom larger as they approached. Peeling paint hung like dead skin from the wooden siding. Some windows were boarded up, others were dark, gaping holes. One shutter hung crookedly, banging softly in a breeze they couldn't feel down on the ground. It felt like the house was breathing, waiting. Sophie, despite her earlier curiosity, felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The stories didn't seem so silly anymore, not when faced with the reality of this decaying, ominous place. The smell of damp earth and something else, something like old sorrows, filled the air. They reached the wide, sagging porch. The wooden planks creaked under their sneakers. Each step sounded loud, too loud. Emma reached for the huge, dark wooden door. It had a knocker shaped like a gargoyle's head, its stone eyes seeming to follow their movements. Lily hid behind Sophie, peeking out. "Don't knock," Lily begged. "Please, Emma." Emma ignored her. She pushed the door. It wasn't locked. It swung inward with a long, slow creak. A gust of cold, stale air rushed out like a sigh from within the house itself. Inside it was black, utterly black. Their flashlights cut sharp beams through the darkness. Dust motes danced in the light, thick as a snowstorm. The silence inside was different from the silence outside. It was heavier. It pressed against their ears. "Hello?" Emma called out, her voice small and shaky, swallowed by the vast emptiness. Only the echo answered, a faint, mocking reply from the depths of the house. They took a hesitant step inside, the door groaning shut behind them with a soft click that sounded terribly final, sealing them in. The entrance hall was huge. A grand staircase covered in cobwebs curved up into the darkness above. Moonlight struggled to filter through a grimy, tall window at the top of the stairs, casting eerie shadows. Their flashlight beams danced around, revealing peeling wallpaper with faded floral patterns. A thick layer of dust covered everything, a soft grey blanket over forgotten lives. It smelled of decay and old wood and something else, something faintly sweet and unsettling. The air was cold, much colder than outside, and very still. Lily clutched her flashlight tightly, her knuckles white. "It's so big," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Sophie, despite her growing unease, couldn't help but feel a strange pull, a desire to see more of this sad, forgotten place. Emma, ever the leader, pointed her flashlight down a dark hallway. "Let's check the ground floor first," she suggested, her voice trying for confidence but betraying a slight tremor. They moved slowly, their footsteps echoing unnervingly on the creaking wooden floorboards, each sound magnified in the oppressive silence of the ancient house. They found a ballroom. It must have been beautiful once. A massive shattered chandelier lay on the floor in a heap of broken crystal and twisted metal. Long velvet curtains, now tattered and faded, hung like ghosts at the tall windows. Sophie ran her hand over a dusty grand piano in the corner. A discordant jangle of notes erupted as her fingers brushed the keys, making them all jump. They laughed, nervously, the sound thin and fragile in the vast, empty room. It was a laugh that didn't quite reach their eyes, quickly swallowed by the surrounding gloom. Further down the hall they discovered a library. Bookshelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling. But many shelves were bare, the books scattered on the floor as if thrown in anger. Some lay open, their pages yellowed and brittle. A thick layer of dust lay over everything. Emma picked up a small, leather-bound diary from a fallen table. Its pages were filled with faded, spidery handwriting. As she tried to read it, a sudden gust of wind swept through the room, though the windows were closed, extinguishing Lily's flashlight with a puff, plunging her into darkness for a moment. As the last bit of twilight faded outside, true night fell upon Blackwood Manor. The darkness inside became deeper, more complete. Their flashlights seemed weaker, the beams struggling to pierce the oppressive blackness that filled every corner. The house, which had been eerily quiet, began to make noises. Not just creaks and groans of an old structure settling. These were different. Small, stealthy sounds, a soft thud from upstairs, a faint scratching from behind a wall, a whisper too soft to understand, like a sighing breath. The temperature, already cool, began to plummet. It was a biting cold, the kind that seeps into your bones. Lily hugged herself, her teeth chattering. "It's freezing in here," she stammered, her breath misting in the flashlight beam. Emma nodded, rubbing her arms. It wasn't this cold before, Sophie observed, her voice strained. Even Emma's bravado was starting to crack. This was more than just an old, empty house. There was something else here with them, something that made the air heavy and the shadows dance with malevolent intent. Shadows writhed in the corners of their eyes, playing tricks on their perception. A coat hanging on a stand looked like a tall, stooped figure. A pile of old newspapers seemed to shift and rustle on its own. Every familiar object took on a sinister new shape in the flickering light of their torches. They stayed close together, a small huddle of fear in the vast dark mansion. The nervous excitement they had felt earlier was gone, replaced by a growing dread, a primal instinct screaming at them to run, to escape this place of shadows. Then they heard it, unmistakably. Footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps coming from the floor above them. Creak, pause, creak, pause. The sound was clear, moving across the ceiling directly over their heads. They froze, their hearts pounding in their chests like trapped birds. There was no one else supposed to be in the mansion. No one alive, anyway. Emma slowly raised her flashlight beam towards the ceiling, as if expecting to see something pass through it. The footsteps continued, moving towards the grand staircase, then seeming to descend. They found themselves in what must have been a master bedroom. It was large, with a huge four-poster bed draped in rotting fabric. A dressing table stood against one wall, its surface cluttered with old perfume bottles and tarnished silver brushes. And on that dressing table, tilted slightly, was a large, ornate mirror. Its glass was dark with age, clouded and streaked, but it still held a faint, distorted reflection of the room and the three girls standing in the doorway, their flashlights trembling in their hands. Lily was the first to see it. She gasped a choked sound and pointed a shaking finger at the mirror. "Look," she whispered, her voice hoarse with terror. Emma and Sophie turned their flashlight beams towards the glass. At first they saw only their own pale, frightened faces staring back. Then behind their reflections another face slowly emerged. It was pale, so pale it was almost translucent. Dark, hollow eyes stared out from the depths of the mirror, filled with an ancient sadness and a chilling emptiness. It was not their reflection. The figure in the mirror was a woman, or what was left of one. Her hair was long and dark, tangled around her gaunt face. Her lips were a thin, bloodless line, slightly parted as if in a silent scream. She wore a dress that looked like it was from 100 years ago, tattered and stained. She didn't move, just stared out at them, her gaze pinning them to the spot. The air in the room grew colder still, so cold it burned their lungs to breathe. A faint, sorrowful humming seemed to emanate from the mirror itself. Panic, sharp and cold, seized them. Sophie screamed, a raw sound of pure terror that was quickly muffled by the oppressive atmosphere of the room. Emma stumbled back, nearly falling, her flashlight clattering to the floor and rolling away, its beam skittering wildly across the ceiling. Lily was frozen, unable to look away from the horrifying apparition in the glass. The ghostly woman's eyes seemed to focus on Lily. A flicker of something unreadable, perhaps recognition or hunger, passing through their depths before the image in the mirror flickered and vanished, leaving only their terrified faces. The ghostly face in the mirror was gone, but the terror remained, thick and suffocating. Lily was sobbing dry, ragged gasps. Emma fumbled for her dropped flashlight, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip it. Sophie stood rigid, staring at the empty mirror. The after-image burned into her mind. They knew without a doubt that the stories were true. Blackwood Manor was haunted, and they were trapped inside with whatever spirits resided within its decaying walls, spirits that were now aware of their presence. The house seemed to come alive around them then. Whispers eddied from the corners of the room, too faint to understand the words, but the intent was clear, menacing, unwelcoming. A book suddenly slid from a nearby shelf and landed on the floor with a heavy thud, making them all cry out. A small porcelain doll on the mantelpiece slowly turned its head, its painted eyes fixing on them. The faint, sorrowful humming they had heard from the mirror now seemed to fill the entire house, a mournful dirge that vibrated through the floorboards and into their very bones. "We have to get out of here," Emma managed to say, her voice a strained whisper. She grabbed Lily's arm, pulling her towards the door. Sophie, jolted from her trance, followed close behind. The air itself felt heavy, pushing against them, as if the house itself didn't want them to leave. Every shadow seemed to deepen, to reach for them. The sense of being watched was overwhelming, 1,000 unseen eyes following their every move. The sinister past of the mansion was no longer just a story. It was a palpable presence, breathing down their necks. As they stumbled back into the hallway, the whispers grew louder, clearer. They could almost make out words now. Lost. A voice seemed to sigh. Forever. Another breathed from the darkness ahead. Cold spots moved through the corridor like unseen entities brushing past them, raising goosebumps on their skin despite their fear-induced sweat. A door down the hall creaked open slowly, invitingly, revealing only impenetrable blackness within. The house was playing with them, guiding them, or perhaps luring them deeper into its evil heart, its tragic history becoming their terrifying present. Their only thought was escape. Back to the front door, back to the outside world, away from this place of shadows and sorrow. They stumbled through the dark hallways, their flashlights casting frantic dancing beams that did little to dispel the oppressive gloom. The layout of the house, which had seemed confusing before, now felt like a deliberate maze designed to trap them. Corridors seemed longer, turns led them back to where they started. The haunting humming sound was a constant presence, sometimes closer, sometimes further away, disorienting them. They thought they were nearing the main entrance hall. They could almost picture the front door, their gateway to safety. Emma was in the lead, pushing forward, desperate. Lily and Sophie followed close behind, their hands gripping each other tightly. Suddenly, Emma screamed, a short, sharp cry of terror and pain that was abruptly cut off. She lurched forward as if pulled by an invisible force. Her flashlight clattered to the floor, spinning in a dizzying circle of light before extinguishing, plunging that part of the hallway into near total darkness. "Emma!" Lily shrieked, her voice cracking with panic. "Emma, where are you?" Sophie shone her flashlight beam towards where Emma had been. There was nothing, just empty, dark space. It was as if Emma had simply vanished into thin air, but then Sophie saw it, just for a second, illuminated by the edge of her beam. A pale, slender hand, its fingers like ice, retreating into the shadows, as if it had just let go of something or someone. A cold so intense it felt like a burn swept over them. Lily was hysterical, screaming Emma's name over and over. Sophie, though terrified beyond belief, knew they couldn't stay there. Whatever had taken Emma could come back for them. "She's gone, Lily. We have to go," Sophie cried, grabbing Lily's arm and pulling her hard. They turned to run blindly, not knowing where they were going, only knowing they had to get away from the spot. where their friend had been snatched by the unseen horrors of Blackwood Manor. Emma was gone, seized by a cold, spectral hand, swallowed by the darkness. Panic fueled Lily and Sophie's flight. They ran, stumbling through the endless dark corridors of Blackwood Manor. Tears streamed down Lily's face, blurring her vision. Sophie tried to keep her flashlight steady, but her hand trembled uncontrollably. Every shadow seemed to leap out at them. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like pursuing footsteps. The house was a labyrinth, its layout twisting and changing, mocking their desperate attempts to find a way out. Doors they were sure led to safety now opened onto blank walls or unfamiliar, terrifying rooms. They heard noises, Emma's voice or something that sounded like Emma calling to them faintly from somewhere deep within the house. "Help me, I'm scared," it whispered. Lily wanted to go towards the sound, but Sophie pulled her back. "It's not her, Lily, it's a trick," Sophie insisted, her own voice choked with fear. The air grew heavy with the scent of decay, and something else, something cloyingly sweet, like dying flowers. The humming sound intensified, pressing in on them, making their heads ache and their thoughts scatter. Their flashlights began to flicker. The beams grew weaker, dimmer, threatening to plunge them into complete darkness. Lily's light died first, with a pathetic sputter. She cried out, clutching Sophie's arm tighter. Sophie's flashlight was fading fast, its beam a pale, sickly yellow. They were running out of time, running out of hope. The house seemed to be closing in on them, the walls pressing closer, the ceilings lower. They felt a malevolent presence all around them, watching, waiting, enjoying their terror. They found themselves in a part of the mansion they hadn't seen before. A narrow, winding staircase led downwards into what looked like a cellar. The air drifting up was cold and damp, carrying a musty, earthy smell. Desperate, thinking it might lead to an outside exit, they started down. The steps were steep and uneven. Sophie's flashlight flickered one last time and died, leaving them in absolute terrifying blackness. They were lost, deep in the bowels of the haunted mansion, with no light, no hope, and the chilling certainty that they were not alone. The first pale light of dawn crept over the horizon. It touched the high, grimy windows of Blackwood Manor, but failed to penetrate the darkness within. The house stood silent and still against the morning sky, its secrets held tight. The wind whispered through the overgrown trees surrounding it like a mournful sigh for the souls lost within its walls. The eerie atmosphere that clung to the place, even in daylight, seemed heavier now, tinged with a fresh tragedy. Nothing stirred, no sound came from within. Later that morning, when Emma, Lily, and Sophie failed to return home, worried parents and local authorities began their search. Their investigation inevitably led them to the gates of Blackwood Lane. They found 3 bicycles abandoned near the rusted gate. Footprints, 3 sets of them, led up the cracked path towards the imposing front door of the mansion. But there were no footprints leading away. Only a single discarded flashlight lay on the porch, its lens cracked, its battery dead, a chilling testament to the terror of the previous night. The search party, brave men from the town, hesitated at the threshold of the mansion. The stories, the legends weighed heavily on them. They called out the girls' names, their voices echoing unanswered in the vast, silent emptiness. A few ventured a little way inside, their own lights cutting through the gloom, but the oppressive cold and the sheer, unnerving stillness drove them back out. There was no sign of the girls. It was as if Blackwood Manor had swallowed them whole, leaving no trace behind but their fear. The town mourned. Blackwood Manor continued its silent vigil on the hill, its reputation darker and more terrifying than ever. The legend grew, now with 3 new names added to its grim roster. Some locals claimed that on quiet nights, if you dared to listen near the old mansion, you could hear faint whispers, perhaps the sad voices of Emma, Lily, and Sophie. They said the spirits of all the lost souls, the girls included, still wandered the decaying halls, forever trapped within the unending night of Blackwood Manor, a chilling reminder of a dare taken and a night never to be forgotten.